Welcome back to NUIC Football Fanatics. We're here to bring you your Week 4 matchups and predictions. We had some interesting matchups last week in Week 3, primarily in our upstate and northwest games of the weeks, where Dakota and Polo lost bigger than we had really anticipated.
Both Stockton and Forreston did have big wins. Nobody really anticipated the score of the Stockton game like it turned out to be. But the biggest surprise for me was the fact that Dakota wasn't able to put up any points. The previous couple weeks, you had it against West Carroll. They didn't really have an offensive explosion, but the defense held strong.
Right.
But then against Amboy, they put up 38 points and Winger was running wild. But, we outside of one play to start the game for Winger, we didn't really see much activity there or Dakota's offense at all.
And that's what you really saw in that Forreston Dakota matchup was Forreston really clamped down on Winger in that game.
Right.
They basically shut down their entire offense, and we've been saying that week after week, if you take Winger out of the mix, somebody else needs to step up, and that just hasn't happened yet for him.
Yeah, and you're starting to wonder if it's going to. It's only been 3 weeks, but, you kind of put the pressure on the other kids. Dakota did have an opportunity to get back in the game in the third quarter, drop pass, kids start hanging their heads, but on the other hand, Forreston was also turned the door, multiple times inside the red zone as well. So,
right.
Both teams had opportunities for Dakota either to score or Forreston to keep scoring. Both didn't happen, and we saw that 21-0 victory.
Right, and you take a look at the Polo Stockton game, shifting gears to that one. Polo marches right down the field their very first drive of the game after the opening kickoff. They score a touchdown, but it gets negated by a penalty. From there, they stall out on Stockton's 5-yard line. Stockton comes right back down the field, 95 yards in under 4 minutes, and scores a go-ahead touchdown.
Momentum switch is just like that. Yep.
And then from there, Stockton then went down, scored another touchdown. Polo then finally got in the end zone to make it somewhat of a ball game.
Right.
Stockton scored one more time before the half, but then after halftime, there was no Polo team there. It was all Stockton from then on.
Right. So we'll see how those teams that lost turn around going forward.
Another game that really stuck out in my mind was Milledgeville's come from behind win to AFC. AFC was up 19-0 at halftime. Milledgeville comes back, wins the game with 18 seconds left. That's just amazing. And it just goes to show you that outside of Stockton in that upstate division, any one of them 2 through 7 teams,
it's theirs for the taking. It's
theirs for the taking. They're all going to compete with each other.
Yeah, like you said, the 2 through 7 teams in the upstate division, all vying for those playoff positions. You might have Aquin, Polo, they'll fight it out later in the season, or someone even as Orangeville as they get going here.
Yeah, I could see Orangeville really getting in that mix now, especially after they prove that they can play with Warren. Warren was a team that we picked to go 6-3 at the beginning of the year. We already know that most likely Warren's not going to make the playoffs, but they're still a team that has lost 3 games by a combined 13 points. They're still going to be competitive.
Right, and that's the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the way it goes if you don't come to play every week. And I'm not saying Warren didn't come to play. I'm sure they have. But if you're not mentally focused all the way through, somebody's going to beat you down late in the stretch, and that's what happened to Warren last week.
And I think a lot of these teams, this, week 4, you're getting into that, okay, we've lost 4 games, now we got to win 5 out. Or, in another week, it's the fifth loss, and we're eliminated already.
Right, and we'll get back into that, too, as we break down some of these matchups, as we got a couple teams that are already there. All right, so our first game takes us to the upstate division, where the Durand Bulldogs go to visit Stockton. Durand comes into the game at 0-3 with a 42-13 loss to Aquin last week, while Stockton comes in at 3-0 after that 50-6 scorching of Polo. What are your thoughts on this game here, Shane?
Well, I like Stockton, obviously. Durand was able to put some points on the board against Aquin. A big thing for Stockton in this game is just don't have a letdown. You hyped up for that game against Polo. It didn't turn out to be what you thought it'd be. But, you got to keep on the throttle. Your season's looking good. We don't see a lot of teams challenging Stockton at this point. But, Durand, we'll see if Durand has something to say about that. Durand is a young team. They don't have a lot of players. But I definitely like Stockton in this.
Yeah, I like Stockton a lot in this game as well. Stockton, this is a great game for them to come out, work on their offensive line. I took a little heat on this last week, but I really feel very good about what I said. And their offensive line needs some work. They let Polo get through that line to put pressure on Fox quite a bit. And this is a great game for them to work on that, to get that cohesion together and use it somewhat like a practice. As for Durand, they need to take it a quarter at a time in order to keep it close.
Right.
If they can do that, they may have a shot. But Stockton's got a lot of weapons. I mean, don't get me wrong. Durand's going to keep fighting. The kids like they're playing for their coaches that they have there. But Stockton's got too many weapons for Durand.
Right.
Stockton's going to win this one big.
And I agree with that. So our next matchup will take us to Orangeville, where the Milledgeville Missiles will be taking on the Orangeville Broncos. What do you think about this matchup, Kyle?
Well, Milledgeville comes in this game 2-1 after their come from behind victory over AFC last week. They were down 19-0, came back, won 22-19, and Orangeville comes in at 1-2 with a surprise win over Warren at 36-28, which tells me that Orangeville can jump right in there and compete with the Milledgevilles, the Aquins, the AFCs, the Polos. So that was a big win by Orangeville. Great statement game. If they can keep that momentum and that kind of game plan, I think they have a legitimate shot at getting to win number 2 against Milledgeville.
Right, and I agree with a lot of those things. But for me, for Milledgeville, let's see if we can keep that momentum going. That last seconds victory over AFC. That's something that builds moving forward. It's momentum. Game of football is a game of momentum. You go to Orangeville, you're going to be playing a team that's obviously more talented this year and has the desire to win. Not that they haven't in the past, but this team believes they can win.
They just got a couple more
Exactly.
athletes this year.
So Milledgeville, you're going to have to show up. I mean, this isn't a gimme anymore. But, you're looking at Milledgeville's schedule moving forward. They still have some tough teams to go. So, I feel like Milledgeville really needs this victory.
Oh, yes. This is a definite must-win for Milledgeville to make the playoffs. Like we stated last week, Milledgeville's got to be at 4-1 heading into week 5,
or it gets tough.
Or it's going to get tough for them to get into the playoffs. But I'm not going to count out the Broncos. I mean, that win over Warren to me says a lot about how they can play. And right now, based off of what we've seen in the Upstate Division, outside of Stockton, Orangeville can compete with anybody.
And I would agree with that. This isn't an overly strong year, but outside of Stockton, you have a lot of competition going forward. But I personally will take Milledgeville in this, and maybe just a couple points. I'm not even going to say a full score.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with you on this one. I do have Milledgeville listed as my favorite to win the game, but I think it's going to be a lot closer than we think it will be.
Agreed.
All right, our third game of the Upstate Conference takes us over to River Ridge, where they will host the Warren Warriors. Warren comes into this game at 0-3 after the 36-28 loss to Orangeville last week, and River Ridge also comes in at 0-3 after a 58-0 loss to Lena-Winslow. How do you feel about this game here, Shane, in the matchup that you see?
Well, I think Warren's going to be able to work on some things in this game, but I see River Ridge competing with Warren at this point. We've talked about, Warren's had 3 losses, but they haven't been by many points. Looking at Warren's schedule moving forward, you still got Polo, you got Stockton, you got Galena, Milledgeville. So, Warren, it's not looking very good at this point, but you're not done yet. If you're going to be thinking about getting to that 5 or 6 win plateau, you need to start somewhere, and I think they can get it done against River Ridge. It's just whether or not, they're able to get into the game enough. It's easy to hang your head after losing 3 games that, you feel like maybe we should be 3-0.
Well, and you look at Warren, okay, they're 0-3. All 3 of their losses are by a combined 13 points. So that tells me that they were in all 3 of them games, which obviously they were. A 3-point loss to Aquin, a 2-point loss to AFC, and a touchdown loss to Orangeville.
Right.
Okay, now you got River Ridge, Polo, Stockton, Galena, Durand, and Milledgeville left on their schedule. You tell me that they can win 6 games, I would say it's possible. They did upset Stockton last year. I don't see them upsetting Stockton this year. But you tell me they can get 5 wins, I can see them getting 5 wins if they stick to the course, keep playing hard, physical football, and control their own destiny. But one more loss, and they're going to be pretty hard strong.
Right, and that's the thing, and the reason most years we'll say 5 wins in playoff points or 6 wins you're in, but, for Warren they need to get the 6 wins because, their crossovers with Galena, and Galena's 0-3, so, you're not getting the playoff points. Warren, you have to get 6 wins.
Yeah, you're at this point in time with Galena failing to get some wins early in the season, and you look at Galena's schedule to close out the season, their shot at some points is going to still be limited. I could see Galena getting 3, maybe 4 points for Warren, which
is a stretch on some level.
Could be a stretch at some level, exactly, and we don't know where that playoff point tier would lie at. Like we said last week, the average is about 38 points. Right now, it's still too early to tell where that cutoff's going to be, but yeah, 6 wins is going to have to be the goal for Warren, and right now, that makes every remaining game a must-win game for him.
Right, but, like I said, it all starts somewhere, and I like Warren in this game.
I like Warren in this game, too. As far as River Ridge, they have yet to score a point. They have been more improved this year. They have a good chance of finally getting on the scoreboard this week, which is a plus for them. Could they come out with a potential win? Maybe, if they can score. That's the only That's the only factor that they need to bring up. They've gotten through the toughest part of their schedule with Stockton, Polo, and Lena-Winslow. But yes, I like Warren in this game as well. Okay, so we're shifting gears over to the Northwest Division, where we're going to go up to East Dubuque, where they're going to be hosting the Dakota Indians. Dakota comes into the game at 2-1 after that 21-0 loss to Forreston last week, while East Dubuque comes in at a surprising 3-0 with their 28-7 win over Galena last week, matching their win total from last year at 3-6. What do you think about this matchup here, Shane?
Right. If you'd have told me at the beginning of the year that East Dubuque would be 3-0, I think I might have laughed at you. Just looking at their schedule, you had Pecatonica and Orangeville, you expected them to beat those teams, but Galena, a team that we really thought would be at the top of the standings, and, they're not. They haven't won a game to this point.
Right.
But, East Dubuque's 3-0. Dakota's 2-1. I think it'll be a good matchup, but I look for Dakota to get back on track here. After that tough loss to Forreston. To me, this game, no disrespect to East Dubuque, you're 3-0. You got things going in the right direction, but I think this game's all about Dakota. If Dakota does what they want to do, I don't see East Dubuque beating Dakota at this.
Right. East Dubuque is off to their first 3-0 start since 2013. Right. And they're looking for their first 4-0 start since 2012. They've done what they've needed to do to this point in the season.
Exactly.
But for the Warriors, that schedule gets really tough from here forward, because now you have Dakota. Next week you have Amboy. Then you have Forreston after that.
Those are 3 teams.
Then you got West Carroll, Lee-Win, and EPC. So their next 6 games are all teams that are still very much fighting outside of West Carroll for a playoff spot.
Right, and
but West Carroll's still a very tough 0-3 team.
Exactly, and you look at where can East Dubuque get a couple more victories, and it obviously gets harder, but I think they're capable.
I see 2 areas where East Dubuque can get 2 more wins to get to that 5-win mark. And I would say that some people would very much agree with me on that. As far as this game goes, they need to keep playing the way that they've come out and played. For Dakota, they really need someone else other than Andrew Winger to step up. We've said that in the introduction. If I'm another team planning my defensive scheme to stop Dakota, that's who I'm focused on. If I can stop him, my chances are I'm going to shut Dakota down. Or I'm going to force somebody else to beat me. And that's what East Dubuque needs to do here.
Right. And, for me, East Dubuque, an early score or a first score will get you going in the right direction. Dakota is feeling it a little bit after that loss. You put up a quick score in Dakota, and, I've seen this team a couple times now, and, the kids tend to hang their heads when things aren't going well. If East Dubuque gets out to an early lead, there might be some doubts creeping back into the heads of the Dakota players, like, oh no, here we go again. And for Dakota, it's all about getting back on track. Andrew Winger's going to get his yardage. Forreston was a hell of a defense, but like you said, it's about getting other kids involved. The quarterback, Cade Meyer, this might be a good opportunity to maybe pass the ball a little bit, stay in the pocket. You're going to get hit. Don't just throw the ball up or whatever else. Take the hit, Crucial turnovers, crucial interceptions last week against Forreston doomed the Indians. And, if you're Matt Holste, you're that other punch of the 1-2 punch in the backfield, time to get going on that, you got to
run with some brute force.
Right.
You run standing up, you're going to get hurt.
Exactly. And for the Dakota offensive line, you got manhandled last week. You got to get your pad level lower against East Dubuque if you want things to go differently.
Yeah, you really do. East Dubuque, I like what you guys have done, and come to play this week. But I still like Dakota in this game. I just think they're still a step above East Dubuque in this game.
And I would agree with that. I was talking to a few guys who we interact with on a weekly basis, and for me, Dakota lost to Forreston, but if Dakota plays their game, I don't, outside of a tough game against EPC, if Dakota loses going forward, it's not going to be because they were the worst team.
No, they're going to be beating themselves.
Right, so I like Dakota in this as well.
All right, this takes us up to Galena, where they will be hosting the Panthers of Lena-Winslow. Lee Wynn comes in the game at 2-1 after their 58-0 win over River Ridge last week, and Galena comes in surprisingly at 0-3 after a 28-7 loss at East Dubuque last week. What are your thoughts on this game here, Shane?
In years past, this would normally be one of those we'd label as, a trap game for a very good Lena-Winslow team. Lena-Winslow has had problems going to Galena in the past. Galena has had their number a few times. But those are two different teams, and I feel this year it's completely different. Galena's not to where we expected them. Even at 2-1, I don't feel Lena-Winslow is where we thought they'd be at this point. Lena-Winslow had that tough loss to EPC, but they've rebounded a little bit against Pecatonica and River Ridge. No disrespect to those two teams, but you still haven't proven yourself, even to yourselves. I like Lena-Winslow in this game, but, I wouldn't be surprised to see Galena, start to maybe turn the corner a little bit, put up a little fight, because over the years, it's like, okay, Lena-Winslow's coming to town. Maybe we can get up for this one, even though Galena's had a heck of a program, and, it's not unusual for Galena to beat Lena-Winslow. I'm not saying that at all. But in this specific matchup, I like Lena-Winslow. Keep the train moving. You had that tough loss to EPC in week 1, but you're on the right track to getting back to where you want to be. And for Galena, I think it's going to be another tough game. But looking at your schedule, you have EPC after this week, so it doesn't get any easier before you finally face Peck and Warren, and finish out with West Carroll and Dakota. You're not eliminated at this point, but if you're Galena, you got to get something going soon.
Oh, yes. As far as Galena's looking at their first 0-4 start since 1975. And if they miss the playoffs, it's only the 4th time since 1985 that they've missed the playoffs, which we've mentioned that before.
Right.
But it will be their first time since 2011 when they missed. And right now they're looking at potentially the worst season they've had since 1993 when they went 3-6.
And and at that point, where are they getting the 3 wins?
You're absolutely right. I mean, I look down their schedule. I see 1, 2,
maybe 3.
I see potentially 3 wins left on Galena's schedule.
A far cry from where we thought they'd be going into the season.
Yeah, I thought they were a playoff team.
I mean,
I think a lot of people thought they were a playoff team.
Right.
I mean, you got people that had them in their preseason rankings. As far as Lena-Winslow's not that far better than where Galena's at.
Right.
Yeah, like you said, they benefited. They've played Pecatonica. They've played River Ridge. Okay, so now they're 2-1. How many people had them 2-1 after 3 weeks?
Not many.
Not very many. I believe the only ones that probably would have been the EPC faithful. No disrespect to EPC, because they have blown everybody's projections of them out of the water.
Right.
And I look at Lena-Winslow's schedule. Okay, they have Galena. This is a very winnable game for Lena-Winslow, in my opinion, based off of what I've seen already this year. But I look forward. Dakota, Amboy, Forreston. You already have one loss. And now you got Dakota, Amboy, and Forreston in your next 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
I could see all three of them being losses for the Panthers. That puts them at 5-4, and now you got two teams that are potentially going to go 0-9. Your playoff points are going to be in jeopardy there.
Right, and your 2 games, Dakota and Forreston, arguably 2 of the toughest places to go and win a game.
Yes, absolutely there. They do get Amboy at home, but yeah, going on the road, Dakota, going on the road to Forreston, that's tough.
But I definitely like Lena-Winslow in this matchup.
All right, our next game takes us to Pecatonica, where they'll be hosting the West Carroll Thunder. West Carroll comes in at 0-3 with their 28-6 loss last week to Amboy, while Pecatonica comes in at 0-3 as well with a 49-8 loss to EPC. What are your thoughts on this game here, Shane?
I like West Carroll. They've had a tough go of it. You open up with a loss to Dakota. If you wouldn't have seen this or really thought about the schedule, okay, we can bounce back against EPC. Well, suddenly EPC beats Lena-Winslow, so you're facing 0-2 possibly. They lose to EPC, and then you're not rewarded, or you're not rewarded with an easy game against Amboy either. Suddenly you're 0-3. I look for this to be a good game to get back on track against Pecatonica. But after Peck, you still have Forreston, Galena, that whatever that may be or may not be, and then you end the season with Lena-Winslow. We were just talking a little bit ago. Can West Carroll get to that playoff mark? I think that they can put some games together that'll give them a good chance to maybe have a Week 9 showdown with Lena-Winslow that could ultimately determine if they make it. But as far as this game goes, I just don't see Peck matching up with West Carroll.
Yeah, unfortunately for West Carroll, I see them beating Pecatonica. No disrespect to Peck. West Carroll is just a little bit better of a team. They're 0-3. We didn't see them coming in 0-3. We thought they'd get at least one win by now.
Right.
I do see them at 1-4 after Week 5, which gives them 4 games to get to that 5-win mark. And as you stated, they may have that possibility of making that game against Lee Win a must-win game to get into the playoffs. As far as West Carroll, they need to keep believing. They need to believe that they're a good team, which we already know that they are.
Which they are.
Whether they make the playoffs or not, that's not a shame with the conference schedule that they've faced to this point and moving forward.
Exactly, the first 3 games,
Yeah, somebody here that has made the playoffs last year isn't going to be in with the addition of Amboy into the conference. Unfortunately, I could see that being West Carroll.
Right.
But let's not put it out yet, okay? Yes, they're 0-3. They still have a very great shot at being 5-4 potentially. But on the other side, they could be 4-5. They need to come in. They need to play tough with Pecatonica. For Pecatonica, they need to be able to defend the pass because West Carroll's going to want to pass. They're also going to want to run up the middle, so they really need to focus on being aggressive up the middle as well. But I see this game going to West Carroll.
I do too.
Our crossover game takes us to Polo, where they're going to be hosting the EPC Wildcats. EPC comes in at a 3-0 mark with a 49-8 win over Pecatonica last week, and Polo comes in at 2-1 with that 50-6 beatdown by Stockton last week. As far as this game goes, EPC has really been a surprise to a lot of people this year, and then you really need to stick with what's been working for them, whether it's them running in the wishbone, the trips, the trips or the wing, and they need to stay physical, which Randy Ashe coach teams always have been physical in his tenure at EPC. As far as Polo, they're not even close to what they were last year. People that think they are being very well misled. they're going to have some tough games with Milledgeville, Aquin, Warren, and AFC. This game here maybe is not a must-win game, but they need to come ready to play in order to make the playoffs, especially with their forecasted schedule after this game.
Right. And, you know, Polo had a little tough sledding last week, and I don't see it getting any easier this week. You know, EPC, like we said, you know, ourselves included, that 2-7, 3-6 mark. You know, we were just discussing before we started this, you know, we're looking at a matchup in a couple weeks down the road where they're undefeated going to Dakota. So, you know, in order to get to that mark, they're obviously, we have them picked to beat Polo. Like you said, Polo is not what they were last year, which we kind of knew after, you know, their close game with River Ridge, and then not necessarily the score of the Durand game, but I would say the score of the Durand game had a lot to do with us determining that Polo wasn't quite to what we thought they would be. But, you know, as far as EPC, you know, they're riding high right now. You know, it all got jump-started off that Week 1 win against Lena-Winslow. You know, then you beat a good West Carroll team, and, you know, they might have had an easier game last week, but, you know, like it or not, you know, you play the games on your schedule, EPC 3-0, and, you know, I don't see them having a test until they get later down the schedule where, you know, they'll have Dakota, they'll have Amboy, they'll have Forreston all 3 weeks in a row.
Right.
You know, so, you know, as far as EPC, you know, just keep things moving, keep what's working for you. You know, I don't see Polo giving you guys much resistance, but as far as Polo goes, you know, you got to find a way to get back on track, and it might be tough, but I think there is some opportunities for Polo to get some good things going in this game.
Well, and this is what's going to be the underlying factor of Polo. You tell me Polo last year against this year's EPC team, I think you got a game of the week here. But this year's Polo against this year's EPC team, it's almost like varsity versus fresh soft.
Right.
And I say that out of respect. Polo's just a lot much smaller in size than EPC is this year. I feel that EPC will come into this game, and I think they're going to turn over what they lost to Polo by last year in this game. And I could see this being a runaway for EPC.
I would tend to agree with that. You know, we've talked about a lot of things, and, you know, it ultimately comes down to the talent level. You know, I just think that EPC has a little too much for Polo at this point.
Yes, I would agree with that, because I really, in my opinion, I see Polo falling to that mid-tier after watching them last week in person as I was there. Polo, in my opinion, is going to compete with the Milledgevilles, the AFCs, the Aquins. They're just not to Stockton caliber. And in my personal opinion, I don't think Stockton's to EPC's caliber either.
Right.
So I think I got EPC winning this one big.
And I'll take them too.
This brings us to our upstate game of the week, where we have AFC traveling to Conley Field to take on Aquin. AFC comes in at 1-2 with their 22-19 loss to Milledgeville after they had taken a 19-0 lead against them. And Aquin comes in at 3-0 with a 42-13 win over Durand. How do you feel about this game here, Shane?
Well, I think that AFC is a little bit better than their 1-2 record. You know, they had Milledgeville where they wanted them, and they let them creep back into the game. And on the other side of the ball, I think Aquin may not be quite as good as their 3-0 record indicates. You know, we'll certainly find out in the weeks playing forward. But, you know, you look at, for me, this is a very important game for Aquin. You know, they still have Amboy, Stockton, a little bit of a depleted Polo team. But, you know, like we talked earlier, Orangeville's up and coming. You know, Aquin needs to get to 4-0, I feel. For AFC, you know, they still have, like, Aquin, obviously this week. Moving forward to Orangeville, Polo, and Stockton. You know, it's last week against Milledgeville. They might look back on that and think, you know, had we won this game, maybe our season would have turned out a little bit differently. But I think Aquin, playing at home, I will give them the slight advantage. I know that's different than what we've talked about before between Kyle and I off the camera. But I just think that Aquin has enough weapons to possibly get past AFC. And, you know, for AFC, you got to keep trucking. You can't let last week's game against Milledgeville creep in your head. You know, it's a game that should have been won, but you can't go back and win it now.
Right. And like you noted, AFC, this is a must-win game for AFC. Because looking at AFC's schedule, Okay, Durand next week, you can chalk that as a win. But then you got Orangeville, Polo, and Stockton yet. You already have 2 losses. Orangeville, Polo, Stockton. That's potential of 3 losses. Okay? 3 losses gives them 5 on the season.
Done.
They're done. Must-win game right now for AFC. And I feel that Orangeville could give them a game based off of what we've seen once again from last week. As far as Aquin, they have 2 wins by a combined 5 points. So, as you stated, they may be 3-0, but they may not be as good as that 3-0 record indicates. But what they have proven is that they can win the close ball games.
Right.
And early in the season, that's exactly what you want to get. You want to have that identity, and Aquin definitely has that identity. And if the ball game's close, they're coming out with the win.
They find a way to win.
Right. But you look at Amboy's or Aquin's schedule moving forward. They still have Stockton, Polo, Amboy, and Orangeville, like you already said. So this could also be a potential must-win for Aquin. If they were to fall into that 5-4 mark, being that their crossovers with Amboy, in my opinion, I feel that they're definitely going to be in. But
a different story than last year.
Right, it is a different story where last year they missed out by 1 playoff point. The cutoff was 35. They came in with 34, unfortunately, and missed out on the playoffs with that 5-4 record. But for Aquin, I want to keep going. Like you said, get to that 4-0 mark, keep pushing forward, and see what happens. Maybe later down the road they match up with Stockton, and they have the right opportunity to upset Stockton.
Right.
I don't see it happening, my personal opinion, but this is why you play the games.
Exactly.
Being that AFC has their back against the wall, though, I'm going opposite of you. I like AFC in this game for the win. This brings us to our Northwest game of the week, where we have Amboy traveling to Forreston. Amboy comes in this game at 2-1 after a 28-6 win over West Carroll. And Forreston comes in at 3-0 after that impressive 21-0 win over Dakota, who was previously ranked number 5. In my opinion, I feel that Forreston got a little proof that they're not invincible after facing Dakota. I mean, yes, they won 21-0. I get that, and I'm giving all the credit to Forreston on that. But at the same time, Dakota proved to them that, hey, we can stop your offense at least for a half. And in my opinion, Forreston won that game because they were in better shape for a slugfest than Dakota was.
Right. And, this is an Amboy team that gave Dakota all they could handle. I'm not saying that Amboy will be able to give Forreston all they can handle, but I think Amboy could pose a threat in certain areas. First couple drives of the game, Dakota was able to move the ball against Forreston. If it wasn't for turnovers, who knows, maybe a different ball game, but that's the way that goes. But Amboy, the thing that concerns me with Amboy is on the defensive side of the ball. Amboy gave up close to 500 yards against Dakota of total offense. You had Winger over 300, Meyer was close to 100 running, and then, Holstein, the other featured backs, This is a more potent running game than Dakota for as far as Amboy will see all season. You got Christensen, he lit it up last week.
You got Akins.
Exactly.
You got Fox.
You can look at the roster sheet and pick out 6 guys that you think will carry the ball, and they'll carry the load. I mean, it's really, that's what it is. So
Forreston's got a lot of options.
Exactly. So, if, no disrespect to Dakota, but if you can't stop Dakota, you surely aren't going to stop Forreston, in my opinion.
I tend to have to agree with you on that, only for the fact that, like you said, Amboy gave up over 300-plus yards to Andrew Winger alone.
Exactly.
Forreston held him to 51 yards.
Yep.
And that was Andrew Winger running for over 300 while everybody else ran for under 100.
Exactly.
Okay? You got You got Christensen. He's probably one of the fastest running backs, if not the fastest running back in the entire conference. You have Fox, who's not as fast as Christensen, but he's still fast. And then you got Akins, who's a bull. Now, granted, I know Amboy's got a bull of a running back themselves in Cole Stewart. I get that. But Forreston's just that much faster and physical on defense all around. They can set the edge. They set the edge better than anybody but Dakota, perhaps.
Right.
Defensively. And they're faster than what Dakota was. So they were able to shut Dakota down, where Amboy couldn't do that. Now, we're comparing scores here, which we both agree that you really can't compare scores. You got to look at matchups. But when I look at the two teams, and then you throw Dakota in that mix, having already played both of them, in my opinion, Forreston is just that much better than Amboy, and I feel that's where Forreston's going to win this game.
Right. You know, like we said, Forreston, I just feel, has too many options. What they do isn't fancy.
No,
but
it's not.
you can't stop it because
it's simple.
You don't know who's getting the ball, and by the time Christensen gets to the outside, he's gone. If you do not get a hand on him, he is gone. You know, we found that last week on a broken play late in the game. Granted, you know, both teams pretty tired. You know, he reverses field on a broken play, and, you know,
34 yards, see ya.
Goodbye. Before anybody knows what happens. You know, I just don't see Amboy stopping Forreston's run game. And, you know, Forreston does have the ability, even though they don't do it often, you know, they can throw in a pass here or there to keep you back. You know, you start stacking 8, 9 guys in the box, you know, you're trying to contain the outside edges. Well, next thing you know, Fox is hit for a 30-yard touchdown pass.
Yeah. And that's where I see the problem with Amboy is their front seven defensively are pretty good.
Right.
But them corners are not that good.
And that's another reason why I'll take Forreston in this.
I will too.
Well, those have been our Week 4 recaps and predictions. This week, where do you see yourself heading, Kyle?
We left it up to you guys to vote on Twitter and Facebook, and the votes came in. We're going to be heading to Forreston to take in the Amboy-Forreston game.
That'll be a great matchup. I myself will be in Orangeville watching the Missiles come to town to play the Broncos. You know, we felt that this would be a great game for both teams. You know, Milledgeville, can they keep the pace going, you know, after that close win last week? In Orangeville, you know, the big win over Warren, can they keep things rolling? So, you know, that looks like a great game to carry. All
right, so that's where we're heading this week. As always, we hope you keep rooting for the NUIC.